Meerim Ruslanova. She's a regulatory analyst of Energy Web Foundation, and she's going to speak about how decentralized technologies like blockchain support the energy transition. My personal thanks for you, Meerim. You're online. Thanks for joining us, and please welcome. Give us your vision about this super interesting topic.
Thank you very much, Eugene, for such a wonderful introduction. I think that was one of the best ones in my life. I'm very honored to represent the Energy Web Foundation, or EWF, today at in this webinar and share some of the insights and experiences that we have seen in this 3.5 years of our hard work. So for today's session, we have several sections, and I'd like to very quickly start with who we are. Eugene has already provided a very good description, but I'd just like to dive in a little bit deeper so that you have more context. Then I'd like to go into the concrete case studies of how we're applying the decentralized technologies that we're building today in the energy sector. And so that would be the 2 case studies. The first one is the renewable energy traceability and tradability. And the second one is the DER integration. And as the end, I'd like to address of different opportunities of how you can engage as an energy market participant or even as a startup. Having said that, I'd like to point out that there is no session on what is blockchain and why it's important for the energy sector and how. That's actually a discussion for a whole another day. But today, what I want to focus is how it is applied. So for a second, if you're not familiar with what blockchain is, don't worry about that. What we're going to look at is what it does. So let's start with the first section of who we are. Energy Web Foundation, or EWF, is a nonprofit. We are building open source, meaning publicly available, decentralized, meaning including also blockchain, solutions specifically for the energy sector. That's pretty vague and very general, but don't worry, I'm going to go into this statement a bit later, and I hope you'll get an idea of what we do. We also help different energy market participants, be it utilities, grid operators, energy companies, energy startups, and innovation companies to co-develop, test, and implement decentralized applications that either create new business models or accelerate solutions for the energy transition. So here's the snapshot, an overview of of our technology stack that we refer to as the EWDOS, or Energy Web Decentralized Operating System. This stack probably looks quite complex and a bit scary. I'm aware of that. So let's simplify it a bit. There are 2 components that you see here, the purple one and the green one. The purple one represents the digital infrastructure layer, or the technology layer, that we as EWF are focusing on and continuously building. So that's the first component to who we are. Our technology. The second component that you see here is the green. Those are the applications. So the software applications that you use to make value and to accelerate the energy transition. So those are the applications that are being run and implemented by the market participants and our members. And so this is the second component to who we are, our ecosystem. So here you see some of the examples of our members who are either in the pilot or commercial solution stage, but there are many more, and your application can be also here. So just to summarize, so there are 2 components to our identity, our tech and our community. The purple layer represents as our tech, so that's where we're heavily working on. The blue layer are the applications, so the practical applications that are run by our members. Now let's look at some of the separate components in the tech stack. And the first one, of course, is the blockchain, or the energy web chain. What's interesting about it is that Energy Web Chain was launched last year by us last June, and it's the first public blockchain that was specifically designed for the energy sector. It's governed by the energy and technology market participants and provides pretty high throughput, low costs, and features for transparency, but also preserving privacy. So the energy web chain is the backbone of the digital infrastructure. But what to do with it, right? Like, I mean, there is blockchain, but you need to somehow make sense of it. You need to somehow to work with it. That's where another component comes in place that I would like to discuss, which are the software development toolkits. They help you build your applications and leverage what has been done before. And so far, we have been working on two software development toolkits, or SDKs. The first one is Origin, and the second one is Flex. So Origin speaks for itself. It focuses on traceability of energy origin. So so far that has been electricity, so renewably generated electricity for us, but it can be also adapted to other low carbon energy, like for example green or blue hydrogen, biogas, etc. And then we have the second one is Flex, which is for digital DER integration onto the grid. And I'm going to cover both of this in detail. So using this SDKs, there are the applications that I mentioned already that you see here, and we can generally categorize them into the two groups. As I mentioned to you, Origin for traceability of renewable energy and Flex for DER integration. So that's a very quick story of who we are. The bottom line is what you can think of us is the party that is building the shared general digital infrastructure that can be used by anybody who wants to build decentralized solutions. So that's the role of EWF. Now, I'd like to move on to the first case study to illustrate how this technology can be actually used in the real world. And that is with Origin and renewable energy traceability and tradability. So to summarize, Origin is a tool for building software applications for optimized renewable energy tracking and trading of the associated attributes. You might not be familiar with the latter concept. I'll cover it in a second. So as a reminder, this is the first category that I mentioned previously. So speaking of the energy attribute certificates, Origin started with these ones. The energy attribute certificate is basically a certificate that proves that 1 megawatt hour of electricity has been produced and consumed from renewable energy sources. Why it's there? So either for voluntary purposes when you want to declare that you have consumed renewable electricity, or for regulatory purposes, if the government actually puts mandate to disclose the sources of electricity, or if the government puts targets for you to consume or for you to generate certain volume of renewable electricity. So we have started with the renewable electricity certificates and designed Origin to cover the entire life cycle of this industry, starting from creating identities for devices that generate electricity, adding them to the digital registry on blockchain, enabling these devices to issue and receive certificates based on their generation, and having them trade. Now, this is the key. Being able to trade the certificates that were generated in a transparent and accurate way is actually enabling renewable electricity procurement. And that is the whole idea for Origin, is to make sure that you scale renewable electricity procurement markets and move towards the future where anybody can sell and buy renewable electricity. Because today, what happens is that only large-scale buyers are able to do so. And you might be familiar with organizations like RE100 that are doing an incredible job. That's the corporate initiative to procure 100% renewable electricity. But unfortunately, they represent the one tiny percent of the market that would like to participate in renewable electricity markets. So the idea for Origin is to democratize access to clean energy. And right now, we have several projects going on where Energy Web Origin is being leveraged to build marketplaces for renewable electricity procurement with the help of the energy attribute certificates. And so these are the examples that that we have. So one of the flagship projects for us is with PTT, an energy conglomerate. Imagine a Shell in Asia, where we co-develop a platform in Thailand for procuring the IRECs there. So IREC is the standard for the energy attribute certificates in the emerging markets. Likewise, we also have a project with the innovation startup Photon in Turkey, where the idea is also to streamline IREC procurement. And the same with Mercados Eléctricos, which is a retailer in Central America. We also have another member, SP Group, in Singapore, that has all the resources and competences in-house, and they're not resorting to our help to use the Origin toolkit. So they use some of the parts themselves to also create a marketplace for IRECs. And likely we're also going to start some of the new projects in Brazil, Colombia, and hopefully in Ukraine. As you can see, all of these projects that I mentioned so far are dealing with the same standard called the IREC standard. Why is it important? So first of all, is that we're dealing with the existing regulations and standards, so we're not creating our own. That's number one. Number two is all of those markets are emerging markets in terms of renewable energy. So we have gotten a lot of the momentum in this type of environments. However, Origin is standard agnostic, and it can work with different standards. Like, for example, it can also work with the guarantees of origin in Europe. It can work with the renewable energy certificates in the US, the NFFCs in Japan, etc. And one example of where we're working in the US is with PJM, the ISO on the East Coast, where we are investigating how Origin can be used to modernize the registry of renewable electricity generation. So now I'd like to just show you visually how it looks on one of the examples with Photon in Turkey. As you might remember, Photon is the innovation startup based out of Istanbul, and together we're using Origin to create a marketplace for IREC procurement. So this is the pilot platform, and that's how, like, one of the features of how it looks is that a seller or renewable electricity generator can log onto this platform. It's a website, but it's a blockchain-based platform, and the seller can register their devices and connect the devices in a way that the data from the generation is being securely recorded on the platform. And so based on this data, the seller can also request that the certificates are issued. And so normally how it works is that there is an independent external issuing body that would either approve or reject this request. And that's what you see here on the platform is you can have this, simple button of doing that. Normally today, how it's done is through PDF forms and email communications that you can yourself imagine can lead to a lot of the human error and not very user-friendly. Here's another example of the features that's for the buyer. So the same website, the same platform can be also used for companies that would like to buy renewable electricity certificates or the IRECs in Turkey. So it's as simple as going to the market and looking through the available supply. So as a buyer here, I can input my category. So for example, I wanted to look at the supply available from a certain region. And as soon as there is a supply available, I can basically put a bid on it or put a request to buy. So that's the feature that's illustrated here. There are many more, but I don't think we have the time to go through them. So just to summarize, so far, Origin has been extensively used for renewable electricity certificate markets. However, the logic of tracing low carbon fuels is very similar across different products, be it electricity, be it biofuels, hydrogen, oil generation with CCS, so carbon capture systems. So therefore, a lot of the technology and the software we have developed with Origin can be actually adapted to other markets. So for example, the application can be used for verifying that your electric vehicle is being charged with green electricity. So that would be the green EV charging. Another option is to have exactly the same application for tracking and trading certificates from green hydrogen, which is a very small market today, but has a huge potential in the next 10 years, as the European Commission directive has come out very recently and outlines hydrogen as one of the most important fuels for the energy transition. Another use case is, as I mentioned, to track production of low carbon gas or low carbon oil, or plants that use certain techniques to lower down their carbon footprint. So those are the examples where Origin can be implemented and where the technical roadmap can be very wide. Having said that, I'd like to move to the next case study, which is quite different from Origin and deals with Flex, or integrating DRs into the grid. So in summary, Flex is the second software development toolkit that I've mentioned, and it's a tool for onboarding DRs, or distributed energy resources, like your battery, like your electric vehicle, storage facility, to digitally onboard it to make sure that you can provide certain services. You as an owner, you can earn revenues, and you as a grid operator can use these DR services to balance the grid better. As a reminder, here's where it stands as a category, and here's the examples of the projects that we have. So why is there an objective for EW Flex? It's more relevant in competitive or deregulated markets. Like, for example, it's becoming more relevant for Ukraine, which has gone through liberalization pretty recently. And the reason for it is that there are many more DRs appearing in the market every year, and the trend is going to persist. Integrating these DRs onto the grid is essential for being able to balance the grid and for being able to exploit the full potential of this clean energy resources. However, today it's at its infancy and pretty problematic. It's pretty siloed. In a lot of cases, grid operators actually had no idea where the DRs are and what to do with them, how to share the data across different stakeholders, like, for example, DSO, TSO, aggregators, etc. So seeing this issue, we decided to focus on this toolkit Flex to exactly address this problem and be able to share data across multiple actors from the DRs and enable these DRs to provide services and have efficient settlement for that. So here's an example of the pilot where we used EW Flex to illustrate the technical feasibility of what we're doing. So this pilot was done in cooperation with ITIS, a grid operator in Germany, and Sonnen, a battery company. The idea was to see if a digital solution can help avoid curtailment of green electricity and direct it to a storage facility that then would provide flexibility services to the grid. And so that's exactly what we did. Here on the graph, you see that there is a renewable energy facility that's operated by EDIS. So that one was located in the north of Germany. It generates certain amount of electricity. So one portion goes to the grid, and normally what happens to the other one, it gets curtailed because you don't need them more. So with this application, what we did is we tried to direct this excess amount to the residential storage or residential batteries of Sonnen. So for the pilot, there was 17 of them. These batteries were basically offering flexibility services to the grid at a time when they could, so offering certain capacity to the grid. And for that, EDIS would, so if the offer was eligible and if the offer was meeting the conditions of the grid, EDIS would accept the service, and the payment for that service would go to Sonnen, and with the help of the cryptocurrency or the stable coin DAI. Everything happened on our test network Volta to exactly see how this can play out in real life. So this project was at the pilot stage. However, the results showed that with the help of the flexibility application and with the help of storing the excess energy, EDIS was actually able to get to the grid balancing close to the ideal scenario. So that's number one. Number two, Sonnen was able to see that the batteries can generate additional revenue. Both parties managed to see that this revenue or the settlement was done in a pretty efficient way because of the use of the blockchain. And that is, DRs are pretty small, so the services they're offering are also very small, and the payments they are offering for flexibility, for example, for 1 day, are in the cent range, not even in the dollars range. So you can imagine that, for such small payments, you need an efficient system that doesn't charge you high transaction costs. And blockchain is perfect exactly for that. So you can, because it makes every transaction financially viable. So those were the lessons learned from the pilot. The same logic was applied to another pilot with ours, and that was with the Austrian power grid. The name speaks for itself who they are. So the concept was also to see how we can digitally onboard a battery to create a decentralized digital identity that would then be stored in a registry. And this with the help of this identity, the owner of the DER would be able to provide flexibility services and participate in the Austrian balancing market, specifically the automated frequency regulation reserve with the 2-second load following service. And so the pilot was serving as the base to understand if the solution can be scaled to accommodate 1 million of the DERs onto the grid, because that's what the grid operator can anticipate in the medium term of how many DERs can be onboarded. And so the logic was exactly the same. We went through the DER and the DER owner registration and creating the decentralized identity, or the DID. The identity was then being reviewed or approved by a certified body. So in the case of Austria, that was the installer who had the power to review if the information was correct, if the DER exactly exists. And then the DERs could be then qualified into participating in several markets. So, so in this example, that was AFRR, the 2-second load. But it can also mean that your DERs can participate in various markets. So it can also mean that several stakeholders can access your data. So, for example, DSOs can access your data for load voltage. Aggregator can, for load voltage management, aggregators can access the data of the DRs for capacity markets, etc. So with a single ID that was created on blockchain, so with a single DID, you can participate in various markets. And so that way the information is not siloed, and that way the information is actually belonging to the shared platform. Once you're there, once the owner was there and the information was transparently shared, the DRs can also offer their flexibility services. So for example, a certain capacity to take from the grid to make the grid operators' lives easier. And if the offer matched their grid's requirements, then of course there was a financial settlement. For the purposes of the pilot, some of the steps were done manually just to see if that works and if the market design should be changed. But in an ideal situation, you as a DR owner wouldn't be sitting there and creating offers for your battery manually. So the battery would be programmed, or there would be an algorithm to do it in an automated way, and you would be just there to provide some guidance on your criteria, on your demand, and for example, on your preference for price. So the pilot has seemed to be successful, and you can see more information on our website about the pilot itself. And the next step now is to understand of how can we use these findings to scale to a commercial solution that would then be used exactly for the grid management. So that is about Flex. Just as a summary, Flex is a tool for grid flexibility, for creating the grid flexibility services and for onboarding DERs in a digital and more streamlined way. Now, I'm coming to the last section of my talk today, and that is how you can engage if you're interested and if this work caught your eye. You, being an energy company or a grid operator or an EV company, an OEM or a regulator, you're most welcome to join our community, to get in touch with us, test different use cases that you think are viable in your market, or even explore the space if you're not sure about what use case is best for you. And that way you would be contributing to the open source technology development, and you'd be also exploring the best solutions that could enhance your business. So here's just a summary of what you can do with us if you belong to any of these categories. So that being said, this is the last slide for me. Thank you so much for your attention. If you kept up with me for the entire presentation, I hope it wasn't too confusing. And here are my contact details, so feel free to drop me a message if you have any questions, feedback, criticism, anything like that. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Meerim Ruslanova. We're giving a warm line. Applause here. And short question comment here. What kind of challenges have you faced when working on these different projects? May I answer?
Yeah, I mean, there are several types of challenges. One of them is definitely on the regulatory side, because the technology is pretty novel. In a lot of the projects that we were working in, there wasn't clear-cut guidance from the regulators on how to best design an application in a market where you're doing this. So, so the best way for us to resolve this challenge was to actively engage the regulators in providing feedback early on. So for example, with the DER integration solution, there's still no clear understanding of how exactly these DERs are going to be participating in the wholesale market, for example, or how would the taxation work on the financial settlement, and should it work, or should there be a tax subsidy, for example? So to answer all of these questions, we really call the regulators to engage. And the ideal scenario, of course, it would be if they create a sandbox. Another challenge that that we saw was really about user education. And a lot of the people not very well understanding of how the applications work and being very scared of the crypto world because indeed it's pretty new. So what we're doing extensively at EWF is organizing this different educational sessions like lecture style, but also do it together with us. So going through how do you access a blockchain-based application? How do you manage your private keys? Are there any ways that you don't have to manage your private keys, for example, etc. So those are the two big ones that we saw. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I really enjoy your talk and hope our viewers do. And ladies and gentlemen, give a warm line welcome and applauses to Meerim Ruslanova.